maybe twice. I'm gonna pray. Lord, today's message, Lord, I pray that you would guard my mouth. Lord, I pray that the words I speak would be your words. Lord, I pray that ears would be opened, mine included, hearts would be opened, mine included. Lord, may I just strictly be a vessel. God, I pray that you would set people free today. Pray that people would be set free today and they would find their identity in you and they would let idols fall to the wayside. We ask this in your name. Amen. When you are born into this world, there is an expectation that is placed upon you. And it's not one you asked for, but nonetheless, in intentional ways and in subliminal ways, this expectation is fed into your conscience from like every which direction it could possibly come. Through television, through relationships, through conversations, through books that you read, through getting on the internet. And the expectation is this: I will fall in love and get married. This expectation that is ingrained into every single person. And it's fed into them so many different ways that it becomes this holistic desire and longing inside of every single person that says, one day I know I will fall in love and I will get married. And if I do, I will be happy. If I do, I will be happy. And if I don't, then I won't be happy. Somewhere along the way that the vision was cast that the only way to a satisfied life, the only way to a happy life, the only way to joy and all of these great adjectives I could throw in there is through falling in love and getting married. Now, I believe in falling in love and I am married. But I'm gonna give a caution this morning that whether you're married or whether you're single, we all might have fallen guilty of having an idol called marriage. An idol called a spouse that you have, or an idol called the spouse that you long for. Maybe your parents didn't tell you that you wouldn't be happy if you didn't find a spouse, but maybe they always spoke with 100% certainty that one day you would be married. Just the one day, the perfect one, and all these different things that might have been said. Everyone wants to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. And when we look at the stories we tell in our society, we are indoctrinated with the idea that when we find the one and when we say, I do, okay, just a little note, my wife and I forgot to write the I do vows into our marriage. And we were petrified when we went to the next wedding and we watched it and they said I do and we realized we didn't. And we didn't even know if we were married anymore. Anyways, we had two pastors, one from me and one from her that helped marry us. They saw our script, they saw the whole ceremony, and they didn't catch it. Whatever we paid them should be refunded. But we have this story, we watch it in movies and we read it in books, and it's when you find the one and say I do, that on that wedding day, from then on out, you will be happily ever after. Right? You know what's crazy about those stories is... they got a little chirpy in here. What's crazy though is that the story in the movie ends right then. It ends right when the carriage goes off. It ends right when they kiss on the stage. It ends right there, and then it's happily ever after. It doesn't even show the life. It doesn't even show any bit of how that marriage works out because, it's just a guarantee. This is the pinnacle of life. This is what everybody lives for, is for this moment. And every moment after it will be happily ever after. Any married people in the room this morning? Anybody? How many of you can testify that marriage has been nothing but happily ever after? If you raise your hand. This was amazing. Husband raises the hand, woman smacks it down. Hey, you were trying to get points, man. It's okay. It's all right. In our society, the expectations to get married, or at least to get married, early, I think, is fading. People are getting married later and later in life. And honestly, I don't know that the institution of marriage is significant in our culture. In fact, I know it's not as it used to be. But here's what I do know. Our culture is no less obsessed with romance and sex. I would say that has only escalated. And the church, believing that God created, sex for the confines of marriage, can deliver a message that expects everyone to get married. And that it's God's will, in fact, that everyone gets married and everyone has sex. And they build up sex to be this. I didn't preview that this is a PG-13 message. And the whole next series is all PG-13. But anyways, is that the church, I think, has done a disservice sometimes, because as we watch the world become more promiscuous, and as we watch the world, everybody just sleeping around and doing what they want, then what we have done at times is we have built up this idea that if you just save yourself for marriage, which I think is godly and biblical and true, if you do, sex will be perfect. That was awesome. But I think we have built it up to almost say, if you just save yourself for your spouse, then this will go perfect. This will be just like Hollywood. It'll be better than Hollywood. And what we've done is we've created an expectation that is not biblical and it is not real. And you've made sex and you've made marriage, you've made it out to be an idol and to people to walk straight into disappointment. Straight into disappointment. See, God made marriage, but he also made singleness. God made marriage, but he also made singleness. Singleness is not his plan B. It's not when it's like, oh man, that didn't work according to my plan. We'll get to this in a little bit, but Paul called them both a gift. We're in a series called Identity Crisis. Last week we looked at the fact that you are not what you do. Hopefully some of you had a better week at work. Just realizing that this is not who I am. This is not my identity. This is a means in which I can worship. This week, we're looking at this fact. You are not who you're with. You are not who you are with. Or that longing, that your identity is not who you're with, or longing to be with that person that's not there yet. God made marriage. God made singleness. He said both are gifts, so your identity is not wrapped up in the idea of whether you are with someone else or not. Also, God made sex, but it's not his will that everyone has it. You're like, what? It's not. It's not his will that everyone has it. So therefore, it's not your identity of whether you are having sex or not. Our society, I've not seen the movie, not recommending the movie, but to think of someone that never has sex in this life would be a less than human life. It would be subhuman, like the 40-Year-Old Virgin with Steve Carell. That movie, just understanding the concept, is making a mockery of the fact that somebody would live a life and not be active sexually. But let me tell you, it's not God's will that everyone has sex, so therefore your identity is not wrapped up in whether you are doing that or not. So if your identity is connected to who you are, let me ask you, who are you without that person? For all you married people in the room right now, take your spouse out of the equation and who are you? Is your identity so wrapped up in that person? I was reading a book called 7 Myths of Singleness this week. And one of the things it brought up is singleness is something we should talk about a lot, because whether you're single right now, you will be again one day. That's sad, and I'm not trying to break your heart. But unless it's like The Notebook where somehow both y'all die on the bed at the same time, somebody's going first. Or sadly, somebody might leave. And my goal in this message is for you to understand your identity is found in Christ alone, not another person. Marriage is beautiful. It can be beautiful. It's meant to be a picture of our relationship with Christ. But that's the thing. It's meant to be a thing that points to Christ. If your marriage doesn't point you to Christ, then your marriage isn't functioning appropriately. Amen. If your marriage is only pointing you towards your spouse, then that's called an idol. See, God made love, romance, sex, marriage, but when we put the wrong value on these things, the wrong hope and expectations on these things, our understanding of our identity gets all out of whack. So here's just kind of my first thought this morning. It's not on the screen, but it's whether we are married or single. Here's a common problem that I see. We make our spouse or the longing for a spouse to be an idol in our lives. We make our spouse or the desire for a spouse to be an idol in our lives. Tim Keller, in his book, Counterfeit Gods, described an idol as this. He said, what is an idol? It is anything more important to you than God. anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God, anything you seek to give you what only God can give. An idol is whatever you look at and say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, then I feel my life has meaning. Then I'll know I have value. Then I'll feel significant and secure. There are many ways to describe that kind of relationship to something, but perhaps the best one is worship. You ever stop to think, do I worship my spouse? Do I worship the idea of having a spouse? I'm gonna read a couple passages that are about God, and I want us to look at how often we might try to substitute another person in the place of God. John 6:35 says this, then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Jesus alone satisfies. Jesus alone satisfies. This idea for bread and water, this isn't just about, hey, like I like bread to come out as an appetizer at a restaurant. This was the meal. This was how you lived. This was saying, I need Jesus to survive. I need Jesus to be satisfied. And too often, my fear is this, married people, too often you are viewing your spouse as somebody that is the person that is meant to bring you satisfaction in this life. You're saying, I am looking for you to fulfill my needs. I'm looking for you to satisfy me. I'm looking for you to complete me. Ever heard that at a wedding before? Maybe said it at yours. It's unbiblical. Love you. Only Jesus completes you. No human completes you. Compliment? Yes. Complete? No. I'm the bread of life. What that pictures to me is that Jesus has a table before you. It reminds me of Psalm 23 that he's preparing a table before you in the presence of your enemies. There's a feast always waiting for you to eat. But why is it that some of you in your marriage feel like you're starving? It's because you're coming to a table that's empty because your spouse doesn't have the ability to feed you the food that you are meant to eat. Those of you that are single, the same is true. You're not starving because you don't have a spouse. You're starving because you haven't realized you're married to Christ. When you realize that you're married first and foremost to him, the feast is there. See, an idol is something you look to provide for you something that God already provides. Look with me at John 10:10. It says, I've come that you may have life and have it to the full. Other translations talk about the abundant life. If I were to watch movies and chick flicks and all these other things, you know what I would think the abundant life is? Marriage. And you know what? Hear me say this. I love marriage, but marriage cannot promise you abundance. Some of you have testimonies that can share that this morning. And some of you almost feel guilt and shame as you look back because the expectation was put on it that marriage is always something that leads to abundance. Sometimes marriage looks like a couple taking up a cross and walking through suffering, through pain, and through difficulty, and living a life that most people wouldn't want to write out. But you know what? It's abundant not because they were together, but because they were together with Christ. The abundant life is only found in Jesus, not somebody else. Too often, if I'm honest, the problems in my marriage is that I look to my wife to be God. I look at my wife and she doesn't meet my expectations. And then if I ever pause to look at those expectations, they were wrong because those were expectations are only right for God himself. How much better would my marriage or your marriage be if you're married today if you quit expecting your spouse to be God? Guess what? You married a sinner. Hello. I think some people, they were dating somebody they knew was a sinner, but they thought when they got married, they'd become perfectly sanctified. If you're married, you married a sinful person. You married a sinful person. Also, for those of you that are single here, listen, there is not one single ounce of abundance that is withheld from you. There's not one single ounce of abundance that is withheld. Psalm 16:11 says, you will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. Too often we look for a spouse to bring us joy. But joy is found in the presence of God, not in the presence of men and women. Joy is found in the presence of God, not in the presence of men and women. How sad it is when we cheapen the powerful truth of these verses by expecting someone to be able to give us what only God can. Let me set some of you married people free today. One of the reasons your marriage is in need of some repair today is because you're married. It's because you're married. You are two human beings. Filled with the Holy Spirit if you're followers of Jesus, amen. Still battling a sinful nature? Yes. One of the reasons you have work to do is because you're married, and that will continue and that won't end. The idea of happily ever after is a fairy tale. Another reason your marriage might need some repair today is because you've made an idol out of your spouse, and in doing so, you've created unrealistic expectations. Also, if you don't know who you are outside of being with someone, you might not be very much good to someone. If you don't know who you are without someone, you probably aren't going to be much good to someone. If you're single, examine your life today and see if you're longing for someone else to eventually come along and do what Jesus has already done. Examine, am I longing for someone else to come along and do what Jesus has already done? Here's another thought for all you married and single people, which is everybody, all right? Here it is. Your life is a gift. Your life is a gift, whether married or single. One is not more of a gift than other. Now, some of y'all remember what it was like growing up as kids, and you start opening presents, and you know you are 100% confident. You're counting how much your siblings' presents are worth. Like you're doing math to wonder like, hey, like who is getting the most? Because it better be equal. Your life is a gift, and whether you're married or not, one is not a greater gift than the other. Paul says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. He says, I wish that all of you were as I am. Now you can go read the rest of this chapter today. I'm not gonna get into all of it, but basically he's talking about singleness. He's talking about marriage, but Paul is single. So he's saying, I wish that you were all like I am. So also to be clear, he does think marriage is amazing. Go read other passages. It talks about how it's a picture of Christ in the church, and he writes more about marriage than any of the other authors in the New Testament, but he says, I wish you were all like I am, meaning he is single, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that. Now to the unmarried and the widows, I say it is good for them to stay unmarried as I do. The point is this, one is a gift, and so is the other. You ever get squirrely in a conversation when you ask someone, it's like, hey, how's it going? You dap them up, and it's like, hey, are you married? And then when they're like, yeah, the conversation goes smoothly. But then if you're like, hey, how's it going? You married? And they're like, no, I'm not. You ever feel like you just don't know what to do at that point? And you get awkward because, one, why did we ask that question? Why do we always feel the need to identify people whether they're with somebody or not? But let me tell you something. We should be, as followers of Jesus, we should not be anybody who see that as anything less than just as an equal of a gift to someone who is married. There is nothing less than about that. Paul, he says, hey, look, I am free to do things for God in ways that married people with children can't. Any married people understand what that's like? That there is a freedom and there is an ability if you're single that is a gift. And there's also a gift if you're married that you have a spouse and a child. That is a gift. Both of these are unbelievable gifts. But here's the thing about a gift. A gift is something you receive. It's not something you are. Okay? If marriage is a gift, if singleness is a gift, neither one of those define me. A gift doesn't define somebody. It's something I receive and I'm blessed by and it helps me. And it's beneficial, but it doesn't define me. Also, a gift really is only enjoyed when you accept that gift. Some of you are in a marriage right now and your marriage is on the rocks and all you're doing is you're just bitter and you're just holding grudges. And let me tell you something, I call you to repent. I call you to forgive. I call you to let the grudge go. I call you to take up your cross and be Jesus in that house. Because listen, what you are bitter about, God says that is a gift I gave you and you forgot it's a gift. Because a gift is only a gift when you accept it as a gift. A gift is only a gift when you accept it and deem it as a gift. Also, some of you are single right now. And you know what? That might be what God has called you to the rest of your life. And I want to tell you, I believe that is beautiful. I believe that God is not holding out on you. I don't believe God is giving you a secondary life, but as long as you see your single life as something less than a gift, you will experience a life that feels like something less than a gift. When we start questioning whether my life is good, we are starting to put ourselves in the seat of God. We have to be people that trust and say that I trust that God has placed me in the station of life that he wants for me. Here's the last move I'm gonna give you this morning is this. Romance isn't the only cure for loneliness. Romance isn't the only cure for loneliness. Genesis 2:18, the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. All right, by all means, Adam and Eve here, they did get married, they did make babies. That's why we're here. But to see God's response to the truth that, hey, Adam is lonely, to see that his response was only romantic is very short-sighted. What he realized is he was alone and he needed other people. What he realized was that he alone and he had a mission that he'd been given to rule and reign with God, and he needed other people, male and female, to rule and reign with him. This is way bigger than romance. This is way bigger than just a love affair in the Garden of Eden. This is a message that someone was alone and they needed community. They needed intimacy. We were all created for intimacy, but intimacy is not only found in sex and romance. That is not the only way romance is found. This person needed other people. The following verse is often read at weddings, and that's fine, but in its context, it's not about marriage. Ecclesiastes 4:12, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Now, I've heard this verse talk about one strand's the husband, and the other strand's the wife, and the other one's Jesus. That's cool, man. That's just not what it says. It sounds pretty. But the point is, it's that together, we are better together. Okay? You are not meant to live on an island. You were created to live in community. And so intimacy can be found in community. Just if you need to write this down, because honestly, maybe some of you that are married, you're struggling with intimacy in your marriage because you have deemed intimacy to only be sexuality, to only be sex. And so you feel like the only way to be close to your spouse is through physical sex. And the problem with that is intimacy is so much bigger than that. You were created for intimacy, and the world calls intimacy sex, but God calls it abiding in him. Intimacy is to be found with God, and that's called oneness. That's called abiding with him, communing with him. It's him knowing your soul and you knowing the heart of God. But also, I'm gonna read this verse. It's gonna seem out of nowhere, but this describes David and his heart for his friend Jonathan after Jonathan died. It says in 2 Samuel 1:26, I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. And you know what we used to always murmur about in church when I was a kid? Like, were David and Jonathan gay? You know? Like that was because it was always the question, like this seems like way too much, you know what I'm saying? Kind of love to have between two dudes. But here's the problem. C.S. Lewis had this to say. C.S. Lewis said, those who cannot conceive friendship as substantial love, but only as a disguise or elaboration of erotic love, betray the fact that they have never had a real friend. Proverbs talks about a friend that sticks closer than a brother. There is intimacy that is found in this life, and it's not just found in marriage. And in marriage, it's not just found in sex. Some of you that are married, let me hear you say, find intimacy again in friendship. Also, for those of you that are married, have a friend beside your spouse. Just a tip. Because let me tell you something, your wife or your husband will disappoint you on a certain day, and you're called to covenantally love them that day, but sometimes you might need somebody else to talk to. For those of you that are single, I want you to hear me say this, that you have the ability and the gift to experience friendship in a way that maybe even married people can't. A deepness and an intimacy and a knowing of one another with somebody else that maybe married people can't. And so intimacy isn't strictly sexual. It's so much more than that. Let me paint a picture of marriage real quick because I wanted to make sure I let you know that I think it's really a great thing. Okay? Jesus defines his relationship with his church as being married to us. You can't get a more beautiful picture. If Jesus said, if there's a way that I could describe my relationship with you, let me describe it in the picture of a marriage. God created marriage. Marriage is beautiful. Marriage is meant to point to Jesus. But when marriage is just about you, then marriage becomes an idol. When marriage is about Jesus, it's beautiful. But let me talk to you as well if you were single. Jesus was single. Paul was single. And so if we want to start thinking that they had a less than life, we could have a coffee and talk about how bad your theology is. But Jesus didn't have a substandard human life. He came to show us, hear me, like listen, married or single, grab this. He came to show you what a fully human life looked like. And a fully human life does not have to include being married. It does not have to include that. It can, but it doesn't have to. Equally can be full. So I just want to leave you with this. Maybe you've been living a life in your marriage to where it has been unhealthy. And we can get coffee. I might get emails this week. That's okay. Send them. Let's sit down and talk. I would love to talk with any of you about this. Honestly, this sermon is like way too short to talk about a very large topic. But maybe some of you are dealing with things in your marriage, and maybe just a little thing that took a little weight off your shoulders today was realize, man, maybe I've made them an idol. Maybe I've made this relationship an idol. Maybe I'm looking for them to do something for me that only God can. And maybe you're here and you're single today and you've also been living a life thinking that it's not a gift and looking at it and you're feeling like that God is giving me a less than life. But he's given you a life that is a gift. He's given you a life that still possesses intimacy. He's given you a life that doesn't lack any of the goodness that he offers any of his children. The question is whether you will accept that as a gift today or not. You are not who you are. In fact, I would say you are who you belong to, and his name is Jesus. Amen. Lord, we love you. We thank you so much for this day. We thank you so much for marriage. We thank you so much for singleness. And what that means, Lord, is we thank you so much that no matter where we stand in this life, we thank you so much for our relationship with you. We thank you so much that our identity is found in you, that it's not found in our relationship with other people and how well that's going, or whether it's still going. Lord, our relationship is founded on a covenant that cannot be broken by you. And Lord, we thank you for your faithfulness to us. Thank you that our identity is found in Jesus and Jesus alone. Amen.